Airports were places where rules spoke louder than people, and uniforms carried weight that sometimes crushed roofs beneath it. In the crowded departure hall, voices echoed off glass walls, while rolling suitcases traced nervous paths across polished floors. In the middle of that motion stood 12-year-old Alia Johnson, clutching the strap of her backpack and waiting for permission she did not understand she needed. She wore her school blazer proudly, navy blue with a stitched emblem over her heart. Her hair was neatly braided, pulled back with care that morning by her mother, who reminded her to stand tall and speak clearly. Alia had flown before, but never alone. Today she was traveling to join her father for the weekend, excited and anxious, rehearsing his smile in her mind. At the security checkpoint, a pilot in full uniform stepped forward. Captain Richard Hull was tall, broad-shouldered, his voice accustomed to being obeyed. He scanned the area, eyes landing on Alia as she shifted her weight from foot to foot. Something about her presence irritated him, though he could not have explained why. "Hey!" he said sharply. "You can't stand there." Alia looked around, confused. "I'm waiting for boarding," she said softly, holding up her pass. Alia barely glanced at it. "This area is restricted," he said. "Move along." "I was told to wait here," Alia replied, her voice trembling slightly but steady. Hale's patience vanished. "Don't argue with me," he snapped. "Get out, now." Nearby travelers slowed, sensing tension. Alia's cheeks burned. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she said, gripping her backpack tighter. Holly stepped closer, lowering his voice but filling it with menace. "You think rules don't apply to you?" he said. "Security?" The word hit her like ice water. Alia's eyes widened. "Sir, please," she whispered. Holly turned and waved over an airport officer. "This girl is being disruptive," he said loudly. "I want her removed." Alia froze. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She had been taught to be respectful, to comply, to survive moments exactly like this. Still, tears threatened as fear crept up her throat. "What's going on?" the officer asked. "She won't leave a restricted area," Holly replied. "I told her multiple times." "That's not true," Alia said, her voice shaking but clear. "I was told to wait here." The officer looked uncertain. Around them, whispers grew. Phones tilted upward. No one intervened yet. "Call her parents," Haleh said dismissively. "Or better yet, call the police." Haleh swallowed hard. "My dad is coming," she said. "He's in the building," Haleh scoffed. "Of course he is." At that moment, footsteps approached with purpose. A tall black man in a tailored suit moved through the crowd, pulling a small carry-on behind him. His presence was calm but commanding, eyes sharp, posture unyielding. He stopped when he saw Alia surrounded by uniforms. "Alia," he said gently. She turned, relief flooding her face. "Dad." Marcus Johnson stepped forward, placing himself between his daughter and the pilot. "What's the problem?" he asked calmly. Ole looked him up and down. "Your child is causing a disturbance," he said. She refused to follow instructions. Marcus looked at his daughter. "Did you do anything wrong?" "No," Alia said, wiping her eyes. "I was just waiting." Marcus turned back to Holly. "Then why are you threatening to call the police on a child?" Holly bristled. "Sir, I'm a pilot. I know protocol." Marcus nodded slowly. "And I'm the CEO of this airline." The air shifted instantly. Holly laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "That's funny." Marcus reached into his jacket, removing an ID badge and holding it up. Conversations around them stopped. The officer leaned closer, reading carefully. Hale's face drained of color. "I don't find this funny," Marcus continued evenly. "My daughter followed instructions. You escalated. You humiliated her." "I didn't know," Haleh stammered. "That's the problem," Marcus replied. "You didn't know, and you didn't care." The officer cleared his throat. "Sir," he said to Marcus, "we can step aside and discuss this." "We will," Marcus said. "With witnesses." Passengers nodded. Some murmured approval. Alia stood close to her father, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. Haleh opened his mouth, then closed it. Authority had left him. Marcus crouched slightly to meet Alia's eyes. "Are you okay?" She nodded. "I was scared." "I know," he said softly. "You did nothing wrong." Airport management arrived quickly after that. Apologies were offered, quiet and hurried. Haleh was escorted away, no longer loud, no longer certain. As they walked toward the gate together, Alia looked up at her father. Why was he so mean? Marcus paused, choosing honesty wrapped in care. Sometimes people see uniforms before people, he said, but that doesn't make them right. Olia nodded, absorbing the lesson. They boarded their flight moments later. As Olia took her seat, she felt taller somehow, not because of what her father was, but because of what she had learned about standing still when the world tried to move her. Outside the window, planes lifted into the sky, carrying stories unseen. This one would stay with her, shaping how she walked forward, not afraid, not small, but aware and ready. The flight itself felt quieter than usual, as if the earlier confrontation had absorbed all remaining noise. Olia buckled her seatbelt carefully, mimicking movements she had practiced before. Marcus watched her with pride and concern intertwined. He hated that her childhood lessons included moments like this, lessons about restraint and vigilance instead of carefree excitement. As the plane taxied, Olia rested her head against the seat and stared forward. Her reflection in the small window looked older somehow. She replayed the pilot's voice in her head, the sharpness of it, the way power had been used like a weapon. She wondered if she had done something wrong by answering back at all. Marcus sensed her thoughts. He said gently, "Speaking up doesn't make you disrespectful." She looked at him. He acted like it did. "Some people confuse obedience with respect," Marcus replied. "Especially when they think they're above you." The engines roared louder as the plane lifted. Alia felt the familiar pull in her stomach, but this time it mixed with something else, a quiet resolve forming beneath the fear. She was still scared, but she was also learning. Across the aisle, a woman leaned over. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "your daughter handled herself beautifully." Marcus smiled politely. "Thank you." Alia felt warmth spread through her chest, different from relief, closer to pride. She had not disappeared. She had been seen. During the flight, Marcus opened his laptop but closed it again, choosing instead to talk. He told Alia stories from his own childhood, moments when he had been questioned, underestimated, challenged. He didn't share them to frighten her, but to show her she wasn't alone in those experiences. "I used to think if I worked hard enough, none of that would happen anymore," he admitted. "But success doesn't erase bias. It just changes the room." Olia listened carefully. "Then why keep trying?" Marcus smiled. "Because every time we show up anyway, we make it harder for them to pretend we don't belong." When the seatbelt sign chimed off, Alia relaxed slightly. She accepted a drink from a flight attendant who smiled warmly, unaware of what had happened earlier. The contrast was striking. Kindness, she realized, was a choice too. As the plane descended, Alia pressed her forehead to the window, watching the city rise to meet them. She imagined herself older, taller, stronger, walking through spaces with confidence. She wondered if she would remember this day clearly, or if it would blur into all the others that shaped her quietly. After landing, they exited together. Some passengers offered nods of acknowledgement. Others avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with having witnessed something they didn't stop. Marcus noticed all of it. Silence, he knew, had many faces. In the terminal, Olia finally asked the question she had been holding. "What's going to happen to that pilot?" Marcus considered his answer. "There will be consequences," he said. "But more importantly, there will be a record. Patterns matter." She nodded slowly. "I don't want anyone else to feel like that." "Neither do I," Marcus replied. "That's why we don't let it slide." They walked toward baggage claim, blending back into the flow of travelers. The airport had already moved on, as it always did. Announcements echoed. Screens flickered. New stories began. Yet for Alia, something fundamental had shifted. She understood now that fear and courage could exist together, that authority could be questioned, that dignity didn't come from permission. Outside, sunlight spilled across the pavement. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were brave today," he said. Alia smiled, small but genuine. "I was just being me." "That's enough," he replied. As they stepped forward into the noise and motion, Alia carried the moment with her, not as a wound, but as a compass. She knew the world would test her again, but she also knew she could stand her ground, even when her voice shook, even when uniforms loomed. And somewhere above them, planes continued to rise, carrying people, power, and possibilities into the open sky. That evening, after they reached the hotel, Aaliyah sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her feet slowly. The room was quiet, except for distant traffic and the low hum of air conditioning. She unpacked her backpack, placing each item carefully on the desk, as if order could anchor her thoughts. Marcus watched from the doorway. He saw how she moved more deliberately than before, how her expressions carried questions she hadn't yet spoken. He remembered being her age, realizing for the first time that the world did not always see him as he saw himself. Aaliyah said suddenly, "Was I supposed to stay quiet?" Marcus walked over and sat beside her. "No," he said without hesitation. "You were supposed to be safe." She nodded, absorbing that distinction. Safety over silence. It felt important. Later, as she lay under crisp hotel sheets, Aaliyah replayed the day again, but this time the fear felt distant. What remained was her father's steady voice, the way the crowd had shifted, the certainty that she mattered. She fell asleep holding on to that feeling. Across town, paperwork was being filed, reports written, meetings scheduled. The incident became a paragraph in an internal document, but its impact reached further than ink. It lingered in conversations, in reconsidered behaviors, in discomfort that refused to disappear quietly. Weeks later, back at school, Aaliyah stood in front of her class to give a presentation. Her hands trembled slightly as she began, but she remembered the terminal, the crowd, the moment she had spoken anyway. Her voice steadied. Her classmates listened. She realized then that courage wasn't loud. It didn't shout. Sometimes it simply refused to step aside. And far above, planes continued to move through the sky, unaware of the small shifts happening below them. Shifts that began when a child stood still, when a father spoke truth, and when authority was forced to look itself in the mirror. Aaliyah walked forward into her future carrying that lesson, knowing the world might challenge her again, but also knowing she would answer. Every time, the memory did not fade. It settled into her quietly, shaping how she listened, how she spoke, how she watched the world watch her. She understood now that fairness was not automatic, that respect sometimes had to be insisted upon. Yet she also learned something gentler, that allies could appear unexpectedly, that truth carried weight, and that standing firm did not make her difficult, dangerous, or wrong. It made her present. And presence, she realized, was power she would carry for the rest of her life, always remembering who she was, where she stood, and why her voice deserved space. In every place she entered,